everyone, and welcome to the Mash and Drum Whiskey Room. My name is Jason C, and if you're a subscriber, thanks so much for the support. If you're new to the channel looking for the latest in whiskey and bourbon news and reviews, you have found the right place. So hit that subscribe button below and hit that bell notification so you know when I'm releasing a new video, or you can jump in on one of my live streams. The Little Book series, first released in 2017, is the brainchild of 8th generation distiller Freddie Noe. He named the series after the nickname given to him by his grandfather, legendary Beam Master Distiller Booker Noe. Now, the new Little Book Chapter 3, The Road Home, is here. It's the first Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey in the Little Book lineup, and it's today's review on the Mash and Drum. As I mentioned, the Little Book series was first released in 2017, started with Little Book Chapter 1, The Easy, broke down the key grains used to build a bourbon, blending corn whiskey, rye whiskey, and malt whiskey with a touch of Kentucky straight bourbon. Chapter 2, No Simple Task, blended Canadian and American rye with an unexpected 40-year-old corn whiskey aged in used bourbon barrels. The new release is the first straight bourbon in the line, blending all 4 Jim Beam small batch bourbons, Basil Hayden's, Knob Creek, Booker's, and Baker's together. Though Freddie doesn't share the exact proportions of his creation, he specified that he commingled the 4 Jim Beam small batch products in the creation of Little Book Chapter 3 as follows, from most to least proportions used. So starting with the most dominant whiskey in this blend was a 9-year-old Knob Creek at 117.4 proof. The next up was a 12-year version of Baker's at 126.6 proof. Now, remember, Baker's is usually a 7-year-old, so being a 12-year-old, that's pretty awesome. A 9-year Basil Hayden at 123 proof. Now, when this high rye bourbon had an age statement, Basil Hayden's was actually an 8-year-old. And then the last but not least, an 11-year-old Booker's at 129.2 proof. Booker's is usually 6 to 8 years. Now, each bourbon is unfiltered, well-aged, and intermingled at barrel proof, so even if you can nail the ages down, you're not going to really be able to recreate this at home. This one has a lot of sentimental value, says Freddie Noe of Little Book Chapter 3. These are the 4 liquids that my granddad created and the 4 liquids that my dad marketed. They're sacred to me. If you had asked me at the beginning if I would ever blend these, I'd say hell no. But there are no 4 liquids that mean more to me than these. The Road Home to me is very sentimental release. Now, while Chapter 2, No Simple Task, was named for the huge amount of time it took Noe and his team to create the blend, Little Book Chapter 3 actually took longer. It was recipe 51 of 57 that they finally chose. Noe said it took me longer than Chapter 2, but a lot of it was that I was working with liquids that were so great on their own, I wanted to give them their justice in the blend. He notes that although he thinks of all his Little Book releases as blended whiskeys, everything going into the Chapter 3 blend is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So here's a close-up look at the bottle. As you can see, it's very reminiscent of the last 2 releases. Looks like a Booker's bottle as well. The label is a little bit different. Still has that really nice dark color to it. I love this little tag they include to let you know what chapter it is and also gives you the breakdown of what's in the bottle. Now, Little Book Chapter 3, The Road Home, is bottled at 122.6 proof. It's hitting the shelves now with a suggested retail price of around $125. So let's get a pour. Nice pop. Now that is a hefty pour. All right, guys, let's get into it. All right, so if you've watched my reviews before, you know I do take a few sips of this before I do my review just to kind of get a good sense of how it's going to change. And I'm glad I did because this bottle did change a bit from the first pour to the pour we're about to have in review right now. So first, let's look at the color here. And as you can see, we have a nice dark amber, very reminiscent of a Booker's type color, a little bit darker than your kind of average bourbon. Obviously at that proof, it's going to have a nice, dark, deep honey characteristic. This coats the glass really, really well. It kind of sticks like glue there. Just, you know, your typical high proof Jim Beam product with that really nice color. So let's get into the nose and see what we get. Here we go. So the first thing you're going to notice when you smell this is that typical Jim Beam funk. You get that trademark peanut characteristic, along with a ton of barrel char. So there's a lot of barrel char right up front on the nose. Also, what I was getting some very, very rich vanilla extract. You would think from all those barrel-proof Jim Beam bourbons, kind of pulling from the barrel, really getting a lot of vanilla in there, and you can definitely tell that in the nose. Tons of dark caramels. When you let this open up a little bit and let the glass sit, you start getting these really nice fruit-forward notes. Comes through in like a dark cherry. I was even getting like a hint of an apricot or a maybe a peach flavor in there as well. It's very faint. It's hard to kind of get there when you're kind of smelling all that barrel char and that Jim Beam, that peanut flavor as well. When you kind of get down deep, then the fruit flavors get a little bit stronger. Then there's just a ton of cinnamon, allspice, and baking spices there. Yeah, letting this sit for a little bit and open up really does the nose a world of good. So it's a really delicious nose, especially if you're a Jim Beam fan. All right, let's go into the palate and see what we get. Cheers. First thing that smacks the palate is that barrel char and deep rich vanilla extract. It just attacks the front of your palate. Then as it works its way back, it's extremely mouth coating. It sticks to the sides. It's leaving this tingly like effervescent type of feeling on the palate. And then, man, you get a little bit of that fruity note right in the mid palate. And then the finish has just like this spice. It's really great on the first sip. Let's go for the next sip, see what we get. Cheers. All right, so second sip. Now that my palate gets used to it a little bit, now those fruity flavors that I was getting on the nose start making an appearance a little bit. You start getting that orange spice, which I think is an attribute from that Basil Hayden. If you ever had Old Grandad 114, it has a very orange, spicy type aspect to it. And I feel like that's where it's coming from. The apricot and some of the cherry, I feel like that's a little bit, I get that in Baker's sometimes. And, you know, the Knob Creek is just that peanut funk, and then all of a sudden, the Booker's takes over. It's vanilla extract and the barrel char and the oak. I think that's really kind of the beauty of this one. You can, if you really spend some time with it, like I've been doing the last day or so, you can really kind of pick out, I think, each component of what's in this bottle. It's not just a bunch of Jim Beam bourbons put together. You can obviously see that Freddie put these together in the right proportions so you can get a little bit of each one. So let's go for another sip here. Yeah, as your palate gets used to this, the fruity aspect of it gets a little bit stronger, especially around the mid palate. It doesn't last very long though because the peanut and the vanilla are so strong. As it works its way back, the caramels take over. Then you get that burst of cherry, apricot, and then the finish is just all Booker's. It's just vanilla, oak, cinnamon, spice. It's a really interesting bourbon. One that I feel like you can kind of sit with and break down with knowing what's in here, those 4 different bourbons. Let's go in for one last sip here. Cheers. So what's crazy is my 4th sip. This gets really kind of dangerously easy to drink. All of a sudden, it just got really sweet. It became a really nice kind of combination of sweet, fruit, some of that barrel char, some oak. But my favorite part of this, and my favorite part, if you've watched my channel, you know I love a great finish. And the finish on this is just really nice and long. It's oaky, it's spicy. I really feel like that high rye Basil Hayden really takes over on the finish. It leaves that lingering orange spice on the back end. Man. Also, you get a little bit of that apricot too, that apricot peach type flavor I was getting too, a little bit on the finish. It's a really well constructed bourbon. So what I want to do, which I haven't done yet, is add some water to it. So let's add a little bit of water. I know when you guys like when I say water. So let's add about 4 drops to this and see what happens to it. All right, I'm gonna let this sit for a few minutes. All right, so this sat for about 5-7 minutes, I would think. And let's see if it did anything to the nose here. Ooh, it definitely made it a little bit more fruity, which is really nice. Again, if you're not used to drinking high proof bourbons, adding a few drops of water, proofing it down a little bit can, you know, that's one of the beauties of high proof bourbons. You could kind of add some water, proof it down, and get it to a proof point that's comfortable for you to drink. Again, this is peanutty. It's still got that barrel char aspect to it. But I think the water brings out the fruitiness of it a little bit more. It's not so covered by the barrel char and that strong vanilla extract and the oak. It's really nice on the nose. It definitely brought out the fruit characteristics. So let's go for a sip, see what the water did. Ooh, that's good. That's really good. It actually balanced it out a little bit better. It's still dangerously smooth to drink. I mean, I did proof it down a little bit, but you get some of that. The peanut and the vanilla get a little bit lighter, and then it becomes a little bit more fruity, starts balancing out very nicely. You still have a little bit of a spicy finish there. Really nice. Go for one last sip. That is so sweet. Even with a little bit of the water, it became very viscous, and it's still viscous and still mouth coating. It's still providing a great finish. This is a damn good bourbon. I'm really loving this one. So if you're a Jim Beam fan, I highly recommend picking this up. It has all those flavors that you love about Jim Beam products. If you're not a fan of the Jim Beam flavor profile, that peanut, the kind of a heavier oak profile, then I'd probably skip this one because it has all those Jim Beam flavors all wrapped up into one bottle, and they're all amped up to the next level. And it's got the peanut flavor of the Knob Creek, a little bit of that peanut characteristic. Then it kind of moves on to the Bakers with some of that fruitiness. Then as it kind of lingers on, you go back to the Bookers with the oak and the char and that high intensity vanilla, and then finishing with that high proof Basil Hayden, that high rye that just kind of lingers on the finish, which is just so good. So it kind of combines all four kind of perfectly, and it was definitely way more interesting than I thought it would be. All right, everybody, well, I hope you enjoyed this review of the Little Book Chapter 3, The Road Home. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, find me on Instagram and find me on Twitter. Always love talking with you guys. Let me know if you've had this, what you think of it, if you had the same experience that I had. And as I always say, it is not about the whiskey, it is the people you share it with. So cheers, and I'll see you again next time. Take care.